recording.
It is
Recording must not be YouTube.
Now we've got it. We're on YouTube Live. Good evening, members of council, and welcome to this second meeting in June of 2021. And welcome as well to the people at home who are watching us on YouTube. We will be doing our agenda approval shortly. And when the agenda is completed, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions about any issue that was discussed during tonight's meeting. But we begin now by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Today we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties with respect, cooperation, and coexistence, and we are thankful for that. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. You have an agenda. What is your wish? Councillor Carver.
I move we accept the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now. It's been moved and seconded to accept the agenda as presented. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to item number 2, the minutes of the regular meeting of June 8th, 2021. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd move that that council approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 8th, 2021 as submitted.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. You've heard the motion. All in favor? That motion is carried. We have no presentations this evening. There are a number of pieces of correspondence for action. Firstly, the one from William Kowalski. Clerk, were you going to speak to that?
Your worship, concerns were raised in the correspondence about presence of RCMP and when they are in town. Certainly the issue that's identified as a concern with speeding in town is something that we are hearing on Facebook. We're seeing that we're not getting those concerns, and neither are the RCMP. There is an area in town other than that described in this letter that residents have been calling in, and RCMP have been working with that. You know, we'd like to think that everybody that is breaking the law is not smart enough to come up with ways around things. That's not always the case, but we do have RCMP are working with residents in that area of town. I did follow up with the RCMP after seeing some stuff on community groups on Facebook this past weekend, and there were actually no calls about that issue at all. There was all kinds of stuff on Facebook, but RCMP are not getting calls about it. So when we follow up on that, we went through the call log. You know, when these things were going on, there was somebody just barely over the bridge on the Oakland Road, and the RCMP are in the area. They just need to hear from residents to call and say, this is happening, we have a concern. So certainly I've discussed it with the RCMP, and we had a chat, our liaison and I had a chat the other day actually with a member from traffic services to try to bring this to their attention, to get sort of two separate divisions is probably the wrong word, but close enough for us lay folk, and just to try to draw awareness of that. But the message from our RCMP is certainly for people to call when they see stuff so that they can respond. They're often just around the corner.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Carver.
And which number should they call?
634-8674. That is the local detachment. If obviously if there's an emergency, call 911, but if there are concerns about speeding or reckless driving, that there's a concern that it's going to hurt somebody, danger life and property, you call the local detachment, because that will go straight through to the provincial dispatch. So if I were to call that number now and I didn't get an answer right away, it would ring. That's because there's not an answering machine that's going to pick up. A person is going to pick up. So just call the local detachment, and if it's office hours, one of the people we know will answer, and if not, someone from provincial dispatch will answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
So I understand the issue of folks not calling, but conversations happening online and basically on Facebook. So the impression that's left in the community, that's something that's not being addressed. And I'm sort of wondering, is it possible for there to be sort of I guess maybe a month or a 2-month blitz of sort of creating awareness that we need to do that, so that folks need to do that, so that it's we can have, I guess, the calls logged. We can also have I guess, more awareness as to when and where it's happening, so that if it's a trend in particular times of the day, then we can be able to maybe have appropriate follow-up. I think if we did a Facebook blitz or on the website and things like that, maybe we might get more folks responding to making those calls.
Clerk, and then Councillor Burdick.
Yeah, we've actually started that already. The concern that we saw on the weekend was that, it's frustrating, because we'd really like for people to call in. As you say, anything the RCMP can find out about trends and locations and that kind of thing, it helps them to be in the right place at the right time, because we're talking about vehicles that are going fast. So if they're not in the right spot, they've gone by. But we also noted the concern that Councillor Carver just asked, what number do I call? So we've actually already started that. It started today. We did some photos of a real live RCMP car that you might see in town. It's frequently in town. We did some photos earlier this week, and that started today.
And will we post that on the town's Facebook page as well?
It was on the town's Facebook page today.
Okay, I didn't see it today. Councillor Burdick.
I'm assuming also that was communicated to the writer of the letter, sort of procedural things. But I do think that is the biggest issue, is like how to communicate to people, how to get their concerns across. And of course, social media is a really good place to, well, it is a place to talk about things, but sometimes that's not where the results are going to happen. And maybe in those, I've often wondered about the position of the town social media, in the sense that there are these multiple groups, and of course the town has its own official sort of page. And I know maybe there's an effort to not engage on other pages because it can get a little bit tricky, but I do sometimes wonder if like maybe cross-posting those things is possible, saying this is sort of, it's a response. We're noting that these are things that are coming up. You don't maybe have to be specific about it, but just say this is the phone number. If you have concerns, for example, speeding, drag racing, that sort of thing, to call this particular number.
Okay,
It's a
Councillor
specific-
Now.
Yeah, I think we're into a sort of a catch-22 here. We're getting the letter saying that, the RCMP shouldn't be in town. They should be concentrating on at night, but then we're getting people complaining that they never see the RCMP. Well, if they're here at night, they're not being seen. I know the other night, 11:15, just 2 nights ago, they came through the center yard at 11:15 at night. Now, people aren't seeing that to know that they're in town at that hour of the night, but yet they're complaining if they're here by day. So we have to have it both. We can't, say that we aren't seeing them and then complain that they're here by day when we do see them. It's they are here to enforce what they can enforce. And I know I hear cars late at night with the loud mufflers and stuff like that. So it sounds like they're going fast, whether they are or not, over towards Edgewater Street where the sound seems to be coming from. I don't know. I haven't seen them. I just hear them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Feeney.
So I think we're on the right page here, on the right track. I do believe it's important for council to continue to communicate to the community that we are open-minded about ongoing and further traffic calming measures along Main Street and Pleasant Street. And I think the deputy mayor brought this up last council meeting around the unintended consequences of the three-way stop has actually driven volume down Kinburn and Claremont. And so, you know, the theme is traffic calming, and that's what the citizens want. And so we have a sidewalk, we have a crosswalk that's going to be created across in the town hall at some point later on this year or next year, depending on when that gets done. And there's some other measures that I think are in the budget as well. And I think the key message for us is just to say that, you know, we'll do more, because inevitably we need to get to the question of whether the community will embrace or wants and will support a 35 or 40 kilometer an hour speed. And so I think council's been deliberate in saying, let's do these other things first. Let's do the three-way stop. Let's do the speed bumps. Let's do the arrows. Let's do the stop signs. We'll do that first. And then Dylan will have enough statistical information to be able to put forth a fact-based story to the Department of Transportation about lower speed. So I'm all for that. And I think we're on the right track. I don't think everyone understands that a phone call to the RCMP will not be considered a nuisance call, but actually providing the police with useful information.
Mhm.
And so I know a number of people along Main Street have reached out over the last week. And I think they're really reticent. They don't want to waste the police time. So I think that the fact that those kinds of phone calls will be positioned and communicated as a helpful thing versus a nuisance, I think is great news. So Maureen, I think that's terrific news if we can communicate that with people.
Okay. Clerk, can we send a very, very brief summary of our discussion to Mr. Kowalski? Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to the next item. Questions about Plan Mahone Bay process? Anyone have any? Clerk, what is your Deputy Mayor's got his?
So I just wanted to confirm on the letter. I'm assuming it will still also go to the police advisory board meeting, the next police advisory board meeting, because they were copied in the letter, right?
Yes.
In the original.
In the original email that
I honestly didn't notice that.
Okay.
But if council wants to refer that to the police advisory board meeting, that's certainly well within your purview.
Do we have a motion? Councillor Carver?
Yes, I would move that the letter and the issue be referred to the Police Advisory Commission or
Thank
board.
you. Who seconded? Deputy Mayor did? All right. Moved and seconded that the original letter from Mr. Kowalski be forwarded to the PAB. All in favor? Motion's carried. Good. Let's talk about the Plan Mahone Bay process note that Mr. Haysom sent us. Clerk? CAO.
Well, I guess I wanted to kind of personally step in here and say that I have been, and I think reasonably remiss in providing Varian more personal response. I know that he provided a submission to the Plan Mahone Bay process through the email that was set up for that process. And I know that it was received by the upland planners and understood, but it wasn't acknowledged on my part, looking back on my emails. And so I do take some responsibility there. But I also think it's important that council see these comments, because they're comments that pertain in fact to the large public engagement process that is still to come as a part of the Plan Mahone Bay process, and council has deferred to take place after Labor Day. So I think there will be quite a lot of opportunities with that process for more public participation in the development of our municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw.
Okay. Have you now responded to Mr. Haysom? CEO?
I didn't want it to be seen as interference to this appearing on council's agenda when it did, so I will certainly write him back after this, but pending any direction from council in case you have any specifics, I'm happy to just write him an email tomorrow on my own part, but I want to see if, if I was going to be directed in
Okay,
such regard.
council? Are we supportive of the CAO's action? Okay. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm supportive, of course, and I would just like to comment that having gone through that rather lengthy document the other day, I have my own concerns about the process. I'm a bit baffled by comments throughout the 100 and some odd pages that, you know, it is the desire of council, it is the wish of council, that it is the blah, blah, blah of council, when to my knowledge, council has not been consulted, or certainly this council hasn't been. For example, I was surprised to see that this council, or a council of some sort, is in favor of strip joints in the commercial area. And it goes on and on. I think there's a problem, there's a fundamental problem with this process, that we've got a huge document with a huge amount of detail in it that looks like it was handed down from the mount. And I think it's largely input from planning documents that are coming out of a business school somewhere, but they have little or nothing to do with living in a town like Mahone Bay.
Thank you. CAO?
Just for the viewing public who may not understand the context, these draft documents are currently before the steering team consisting of council and the PAC that was established by council to oversee the upland process, and will be at that stage until such a time as that steering team is comfortable. So obviously there's opportunity for working on those documents, and if anyone's looking forward to seeing them come out into the public, that will take place when and if the steering team has approved that to council and council's approved the release.
Okay, thank you, CAO. Councillor Wilson, I agree with you. It is a large document. There's a lot of material contained in the document. I'm not sure personally where some of the ideas have come from. You know, the consultant says, I talked to a couple of people, and that's what's, you know, that's why that item is in there. But as the CAO has suggested, the steering committee, we now have an opportunity to ensure that what's there is what we think should be there before it goes to the public for their input and their reflection. Deputy Mayor, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so not that I disagree with the comments that have been made, but I think we, like you said, there's that opportunity for us, and I guess further to that, the hope, at least on my part, is that we do our due diligence before the document goes out to the public.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we have it right. The planners are trying to do their best to give us all the options that are there. I think we, from a governance perspective, it's from our side of things, we need to ensure that the process is right for us and for the citizens. And so I see an opportunity for us to delay if we need to delay it and so far we've delayed it because it could have even gone faster. We said, no, we want to make sure that at least we're able to do some face-to-face. That's why it was pushed to September. So from my perspective, there's still opportunity for us to influence the way it goes so that it can translate to a product or a piece of document that we can all say we own and not, and it doesn't become something that was, I wouldn't pick Councillor Wilson's terminology, but something that was handed to us, but something that we actually did craft as a community. And from that perspective, from on my part, I think we just need to slow the process down enough for us to be able to deliberate on the pieces that are in there in a very deliberate way.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Let's go to the note we had from Primrose Lane on the Parkview graduates of 2021. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, we received a similar request a year ago.
Yeah.
When, the impact of COVID really took the, our graduation ritual offline as sponsored by the school and the school board. And a year ago, I voted against the motion to financially support what I consider really a private party unsanctioned by the school board. And so I really believe that the note is well-intended. The folks at Primrose Lane and the other committee members have, wonderful intentions, and I think are trying to be supportive. But, this is an unsanctioned party. It's not something that's coming from the school board. It's not Safe Grad. It's a private party. Maybe it's chaperoned. Maybe it's not. And I guess from my perspective, and this is the same one I shared a year ago, as the son of a school principal who always shared with me that the day of the year that he had the most fear about was graduation night. Even if we would have had a chance to bring David Allen back, a longtime school principal, this is where Safe Grad came from. The origins of Safe Grad came out of tragedies on graduation night, unstructured private parties. So maybe I'm a little curmudgeonly old school here, and I have children that aren't that far away from being recent high school graduates either. But I think as a town council, I don't know how, I don't feel really comfortable supporting something that has this few structural components. So I have concerns about this one.
Okay. Other councillors? Deputy Mayor.
I agree with everything that Councillor Feeney has said, and on top of that, I think my challenge was just figuring out, so whatever it is, the endeavor they have, what are we paying for if we're going to contribute to it? It has no detail as to what it is we would be contributing towards. So in many ways, even if it was an organization coming to us for funding, we would be asking for some detail as to what it is we are contributing towards. So I don't see a way in which, in my view, I'd be able to sort of say, well, just give them some money because they're doing something with students, without some detail of what exactly it is that would be paying towards.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that I think the line that maybe stood me up a little bit there was our plan will be sent to Dr. Strang's office for approval, and it didn't say what the plan was. And the idea of having that after the fact is sort of a little bit too vague. I totally understand this. I do hope that they're able, I mean, I'm not gonna, I know people want to celebrate their graduation, and I think there are ways of doing it. And I'm not going to be like showing up on their lawn saying, "What are you doing?" But if it's a privately owned business, maybe she can raise the funds from other local business owners in that sense. But understanding the public health situation too. So, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
Yes, I'm prepared to make a motion to write to to respond to the letter declining the request with an explanation according to how we've discussed it here. But basically the motion would be to write and decline the request.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, seconds. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the last piece of correspondence. MP Peter Julian is seeking endorsement for a couple of bills that he is sponsoring. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor had a chance to review Mr. Julian's motion, his M84 anti-hate crime and incidents motion that I think is a private member's bill heading to for review within Parliament. And I think it has a lot of redeeming qualities. And on an individual basis, I think I might be strongly in support of his private member's bill, and maybe I'll even pass that along to our MP Bernadette Jordan. But it's not crystal clear to me how far this is away from our intended thinking around our no proclamation policy. And as I've shared before, I'm a little concerned about these occasional letters that come to council seeking municipal councils to essentially lobby on behalf of another level of government's agendas. And so while I'm personally, pretty supportive of Mr. Julian's private member bill, I really am reticent as a council whether we should be weighing into these matters and simply, I think this is something we can do individually, but I'm not sure it's appropriate for the council to weigh in on these types of things. Anyway, so I'll be voting against sending a letter of recommendation to support the endeavor, although I probably will personally send an email to say, go for it, and I hope you do well.
Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. I guess on the other hand, sort of think part of the role of being in any form of government, whatever level it is to have and make a stand when it comes to ethical stances. In this situation, it does seem to me that from any party, this would be a really great motion. And I would endorse signing this because it is specifically for those who haven't read this. It's a anti-hate crimes and incidents. It's banning symbols of hate acts, and that is something that, I mean, they've been very controversial over the years, but ultimately the decisions have been that hate symbols are not welcome. This would be a more specific declaration, and I do hope that we here in Mahone Bay would agree with what is being, the motion here ultimately. So I would agree to signing it.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor Now.
Thank you. I come down on Councillor Feeney's side on this issue, not because I disagree with the sentiments expressed in the letter at all. I think I can't imagine that anyone would, but my position has been the same throughout. I think we should be very careful about lobbying for or against issues that are issues for the federal or the provincial governments. We have in the past passed motions at this council supporting particular issues that flew in the face of both our provincial government and our federal government. I'm thinking about fish farms now. And you can argue that till the cows come home. But I often wonder that when we're applying for large chunks of money from those very same governments, and the man has got his pen poised over the piece of paper, does he remember good old Mahone Bay throwing sand in his face over this issue or that one? And I think we need to be very careful.
Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Now was waiting. Councillor Now?
Yeah, I have to agree with Councillor Feeney and Wilson. I very much agree with this, and I would certainly be willing as an individual signing it and sending my support. And I think maybe if we could somehow promote what the government is doing and say, citizens, let your voice be heard, and let each individual citizen make their voice heard on their own, whether they wish to do that or not. But as a council, I don't think that we should be signing it on their behalf.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
I think this all comes down to what we truly believe is the right thing to do. From my perspective, if we truly agree and believe that the right thing to do is to have a bill like this go through, then we should support it. Taking the stance that we are worried about whether we'll get money or not, or we'll get funding or not, or we'll offend a particular government or not, that should be secondary. The issue is this something good to do for humanity's sake? If it is, then we should be doing that. I think we, as a country, we are where we're at now, in many ways, with a past that is not very, as we can see daily with regards to relationships with the indigenous folks. We are where we're at now because people did not do the right thing when they knew to do better. And I think this bill wants to make that right. This bill wants or requires the support of many people to make it right. And if we can be able to do that, we're not lobbying, we're just making a stand for what is right. And I know there's hesitance because of thinking of what will be the next thing that comes to the table. Make that decision when that next thing comes to the table, whether that's the right thing to do or not. So I would urge fellow councillors to think about it from that perspective. You've all indicated that personally you would support it. And if you can't support it personally, I don't see why you cannot support it at this table. So maybe there's space there for you to rethink the decision. I would be supportive of us sending an endorsement of this motion.
Okay, Councillor Feeney.
You know, Mayor, I think this is one of those situations where, you know, it's, you know, there's a policy, and then there's, I think as the Deputy Mayor says, there's the altruistic, or there's the right thing to do. And I do think that being respectful, everyone trying to make the right decision, that, you know, I'd recommend that we defer item 4.4 until our next council meeting to give us, I think we've had an opportunity to hear a variety of perspectives on this call. And I think another 2 weeks or so of soak time on this particular item will be helpful. And then we'll be able to come back 2 weeks from now and with this item again on the agenda, and I think have, you know, further developed thoughts on it, and people will be able to weigh in one way or the other with confidence.
Is that a motion to table the item till the next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Now. It's been moved and seconded that we will take this item up again at the next meeting after we've had some time to digest the value of what's here, if in fact it's needed. So that's the motion. All in favor? Okay. I'm a no as well. So we're left with the issue tonight, right? It was only 3 people voted for the motion. My only concern is that he talks about we endorse to urge the federal government to immediately stop all forms of hate and all forms of discrimination, hate crimes and incidents. I'm not sure how much this particular item is going to go towards that. Certainly, ending the display and sale in Canada of symbols of hate. I think people are quite capable. They show how capable they are of hating without having the symbol on their sleeve. However, is there another motion here for this particular item? Councillor Wilson.
I move that council direct staff to write the MP, Mr. Julian, declining to endorse his letter.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Carver. We have a motion moved and seconded to decline the opportunity to support the member's private bill. You've heard the motion. All in favor? We'll make it 5. Okay. So staff will send a note off. I think, isn't the House ready to prorogue for the summer?
Yes,
So this is going to die on the odor paper.
yes, that's probably why it's up.
Okay. Not that that makes it any more right, but okay. Let's go to correspondence for information purposes, section 5. What is
Your
your
worship,
wish,
Deputy Mayor.
Councillor? Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
So I know it sort of seems like a very small thing, but I just want to get a sense from folks who declined to endorse this bill, whether this is truly the right thing to do, and we've declined an opportunity to support a bill that talks about anti-hate, whether it will die on the floor or not. Well, that being what it is, the political process. But we're sort of saying that we as a council do not support, basically saying these measures to tackle hate and hate crimes, we are not supportive of those, because that's essentially the statement we're putting across by declining that.
Okay.
And it's okay if you disagree, but that's what I'm taking from that process we've just gone through.
We do have a history around the council table, Deputy Mayor, of not endorsing private bills such as this one, regardless of the content.
Yeah.
We just are in the habit of not endorsing them. Councillor Feeney.
Right. I mean, I think it would be considered unusual for the municipal council to endorse private members' bill or proclamations. Historically, we've by design tried to avoid those situations, to avoid the very situation we've walked ourselves into this evening. That's why we have a no proclamation policy, which I think would have worked well in this situation. It has nothing to do with the merits of the bill. It has to do with the mandate that we have as municipal councilors versus just people who, can show up, a couple times a week on a month on Zoom. So, I'm disappointed. I think when we do things to box ourselves in, to not gain an opportunity to, have some sober second thought and give ourselves space and time, there is no need for us to have that decision tonight. This was not a time sensitive matter. This matter could have been deferred. And so it is where it is now. And I think it's regrettable that we're here, because I think everybody's well intended. And personally, it's just, this is the sausage making of municipal government. I mean, this is why we try to stick to our knitting, and we try to play our position and play in our lane. And it's difficult because next week we could have a private member's bill talking about peace in the Middle East, and then the next week it could be on some other contentious issue. And I think it's just difficult for municipal councilors and municipal council who don't often have the full suite of information to make an intelligent, informed opinion. and, being forced to make motions of yay or nay or support or no support. That's what we try to avoid these situations.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick.
For me, I guess I don't see a difference between essentially making a declaration that we agree with banning Symbols of Hate Act and making a declaration that there's a climate emergency. To me, that's a form of proclamation. That's something that some people don't agree with. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, in the town and I'm sure in Canada who don't agree that there is in fact a climate emergency. And sometimes those are the very same people who don't believe that, racism is an issue, showing swastikas casually is an issue, being anti, all these various ways of showing hate, essentially. To me, it's cumulative. Yeah, we're a municipal unit. We're small, but historically, that's how things happen. They accumulate. They start at a small scale. They get bigger, and also historically, it can be very hard for people who do the thing that's not going to get them the money to say the things that make other people uncomfortable, I guess. So I am disappointed. It does seem like the majority do not wish to sign this, but I do find it difficult to differentiate between this issue and other ones that we've agreed on, unless they seem maybe more politically expedient somehow.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
So just the last comment of just before we put this to bed. So I remember we talked about racism and council as a whole was struggling to figure out what do we need to do or what can we do. This was an opportunity to do something and you declined it. I'm very disappointed in many ways. I think it confirms my very initial statement around, I think as a council, we are not seized of the importance of addressing racism. And I think at some point, we all need to, I guess, face up to that fact that we are not ready, we are not there yet individually, and ask ourselves, why is that the case? We can use all manners of posturing around it has been our tradition, it is our desire for X and Y, but the basic question is that, are you ready to address racism? And we've sort of said no with this particular motion. Just something I thought I'd say to as you reflect on what's happened right now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver.
I do want to disagree with all respect with the Deputy Mayor's comment, at least the implication that of not wanting to address racism. My position here tonight was because I personally didn't feel that this particular way was the way I wanted to, as Councillor Carver in the town of Mahone Bay, felt it was the right way to approach racism. That was my personal choice. And I'm uncomfortable with the idea that of the implication that I'm not prepared to address racism. I'm not prepared to address it in this particular way.
Thank you, Councillor Carver. Okay, can we move on? Correspondence items or correspondence for information purposes? What would you have, Kate, Council? CAO? Did you
I just wanted to call attention to the correspondence from Minister Irving concerning the climate consultations, but other members of council may wish to speak to that as well. I just didn't want to miss that in a receive and file.
Okay,
I have a suggestion in that regard, if
well,
that's
we'll,
okay.
we'll see what the motion is and then we'll, okay, what is your wish with these correspondence information items? Counselor Wilson?
My motion would be to receive and file, your worship.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Counselor Carver? On the motion, the question, CAO, you wanted to comment on the minister's letter?
Yeah, I'm sure you've all seen the announcement that the province is undertaking a consultation on the new Sustainable Development Goals Act and regulations running to July 26th. Within that, it prescribes essentially there's a public process being led by Clean Foundation, and they've kind of outsourced the consultations around the province. So it's created a do-it-yourself consultation kit. And they're essentially saying that communities that want to participate in the consultation need to organize a consultation using this kit and provide the results of said consultation back to the Clean Foundation, who will aggregate that. The province is going to hear from residents about this. Now, this type of legislation has significant bearing on us, especially with our own utility and renewables ambitions. And I think it would be great for residents of Mahone Bay to have the opportunity to participate in the consultation process. We have staff, we have a climate and energy program manager and a summer student who certainly would be capable of following the do-it-yourself kit and carrying out a consultation here in town prior to the July 26th deadline. So I know that they won't necessarily love that I'm suggesting this, but I'd like to suggest council direct staff to carry out an additional consultation utilizing the do-it-yourself consultation guidelines from the Clean Foundation.
Sounds like a good idea to me. You're talking about Catherine Dory and the new student that we have. Yeah, Counselor Burdick, and then Counselor Carver.
I'll make that motion. It does seem like time is of the essence in this situation. It's approximately a month that we have to get that information, so.
Okay, that's a motion to direct the staff to, okay. Counselor Carver, did you have a second?
Yeah, I was going to second the motion.
All right.
And then if I may, while my mic is still on, I'd just like to ask again, the question about how letters end up in information only or action required. I'm just putting that out again when this one sort of seemed to implicitly have an action component to it.
I think it's an action if we choose to undertake it. Right? Which is exactly what's happened. CAO?
Yeah, I certainly agree that that's how we handle them. And just wanted to note that council does have eventually a discussion of the town council policy coming up at your policy and strategy committee at some point. So that will certainly present an opportunity to look at how correspondence is specifically directed by policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor. Moved and seconded to direct staff to get involved to present this cleanfuture.ca program to the townsfolk. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay.
Your worship, we still have the motion to receive.
Motion
and
to
file.
receive and file what's left. Okay. All in favor? Motion's carried. Deputy Mayor, are you commenting or voting?
Commenting, voting and commenting. Just wondering about John Bain's letter and whether because we're having that conversation about talking trees at the next policy and strategy, whether we need a motion to refer it there to be considered as part of the conversation.
To refer John Bain's letter to that committee.
Yeah.
Clerk, can that happen?
Council could make that motion to do so. That is something that will be discussed at the next meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee on Monday evening. Council could make a motion to forward that, and then at the time of the meeting, the agenda could be amended under the point in the agenda where the agenda is approved.
Okay,
I will also note, though, that it is currently the staff plan that when we're talking about a tree bylaw, that will be months down the road. So it's not the staff anticipation that we will walk away from that. The next time that the meeting minutes from the upcoming policy and strategy committee come to council, we'll still be months out from when we actually have a bylaw to put before council for consideration. But yes, it can be that
Okay.
correspondence can be referred to that committee meeting.
but if we go back to the idea as we discussed earlier tonight about the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw, there are elements in there as well around that particular item that this document may provide some education to council as well. Deputy Mayor, is that your motion that we refer this to the meeting on the next meeting of the policy committee? Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Now, you've heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. All right, so now we're back to the motion to receive and file. All in favor? Thank you. Maureen, clerk, you did one of those things.
We're
Were you
fine.
going to add something?
We're good.
Okay, let's go to staff reports. The staff report to council. This is the biggie. The end of the month. Questions for the CAO on the staff reports?
Look good, Mayor.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much. I'm still struggling with this report. I haven't figured out the coding that tells me when something is old news and when something is new news and I should pay attention. So I end up reading it all just to make sure. And I'm wondering if it would be possible when there's new text going into the report, that if it could be highlighted so that we know it's new. In other words, it's stuff that didn't appear in the last report.
Good point.
Yeah, I think Councillor Wilson, can I just ask, are you able to tell us, is it mostly in the CAO, Deputy CAO, Director of Operations, Finance Manager sections that you're looking for the new information? I assume because those don't get updated as much, a lot of the information stays the same. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
My apologies, Your Worship. I don't have anything, well, I'm just leafing through it now, and most of what I see seems to be stuff that's been there for, some time. And some of it, for example, there is an item in there on the wildlife feeding bylaw saying that we're going to do something, give it first reading, which, as we know, that was dispensed with a couple of weeks ago. So it seems to me that some things aren't current, some things are new, but I can't tell that they're new unless I go back and compare it to the last one I read. And it just, for me at least, it's a bit confusing.
No, that's very much appreciated. We'll see what we can do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do we have other comments? Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Carver.
Yeah. So I can't seem to find it, but I was sort of wondering, based on just the conversation we just had earlier around traffic and on Main Street, and Councillor Finney talked about a few different things that essentially were planned and we're planning to undertake. I'm sort of wondering what's the status of that. I was a bit taken back when Joe said next year for some things, and also in my mind, I'm thinking we're supposed to do them this year. So
Yeah.
A little bit of clarification would be really appreciated on that piece.
Yeah, so that projects are expected to go forward this year. I don't know in terms of the town hall, like the big question there is not yet been resolved. It's a design question. So we have approval from engineers to look at design options. We've right now got a proposal that would take the pedestrian crossing into a island that is, it's not suitable. So we would have to remove that. There's parking that people currently do on that inside of that island, which so that would also have to be removed. And it would be a great opportunity to combine these changes with a potential change in the staff parking requirements on site. We've talked a lot about this with regards to Public Works. So, we will have some engineering designs to look at, with time to implement this fall. But I would suggest that, the best option for it would be predicated on some changes to the parking area access as well to, really take the opportunity to improve public safety there rather than just adding a crosswalk that it may not actually enhance or may even detract from public safety as the intention.
Okay. Councillor Carver.
Thank you. I have a question for the statistics section. And could ask this question when the fire department makes its report, but I'll ask it here. It's number 3, the fire department stats. I'm interested in the difference between the number for fire alarms and mutual aid. What specifically happens under fire alarm as distinct from mutual aid?
So the fire alarm calls are within, well, I'm sure Richard could say it better than me, but I'll just say the fire alarm calls are within our service territory. The mutual aid, what that signifies is that we're responding to a call outside of our own service territory. I don't know, Richard, feel free to elaborate if you'd like.
Yeah, fire alarms are basically an alarm that goes off in a building, and we're called because that alarm has gone off, regardless of where it is. Mutual aid is if another fire department asks for our assistance. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. And while we're there, what would come under other?
That's probably one for either the department or if Richard chooses to go out on a limb right now, but I'm sure I could look back on the previous reports. I know there's been some details provided on some of those verbal reports.
Maybe cat in a tree, is that that kind of thing?
It could be that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure what they're specifically referring to in this quarterly report.
Yeah,
but,
okay.
It could be anything miscellaneous like that. Fortunately, we haven't had any structure fires, so that's not listed there, but yeah, it could be a grass fire, it could be anything along that line.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate the distinction now between the fire alarms and the mutual aid. Thank you.
CAO, what's the latest schedule for town hall and occupancy?
Well, that's the subject of one of the specific staff reports on this agenda, so maybe we should hold questions
So
till
we'll
then.
do it all in that one, will we? Okay, Councillor Burdick.
Thank you. I did have a question about the home program and about the installations, if there's any update on when those might resume or, yeah.
Yeah,
Are we
that's a
still
good
waiting?
question. I believe that the resumption is intended to take place with phase 3 or quite soon. It may have already begun, but I can't confirm that it has. I know we've asked that question. It was coming soon, and they've been staying tuned for the right time to do that work appropriately. So it either has resumed or I expect it will resume soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Going once, going twice? Thank you. Let's go to the area annual report. Councillor Feeney.
I think a really illuminating report, lots of exciting things happening. I'm wondering, Dylan, if there's if the financial statements were are ready to be reviewed or to be seen or are made public. It's unusual to have an annual report without the financials done, but I suppose those will get done after they're audited later in the summer. Is that the plan?
Yeah, I don't believe that the staff have really thought about the interrelation of the reporting of the financials with that area report. So they're not completed yet, and they will be shared when they are. But interesting thought maybe for next year is it, time this to be able to provide some financial reporting if it's going to be a public document.
Yeah, it certainly appears that the scope and mandate of area continues to evolve and grow. And I'm sure that, as Councillor Wilson's made the point a few times about the correlation between the dividend we receive and the mandate, I think it's important to see the glossy report, with a companion set of financials so that we can understand the relativity between all of the amazing things that area is doing, but also correlate that with the amount of dividend that we're receiving. So, timing is everything, Dylan. So I think it was a great report. I'm looking forward to seeing the ongoing progress.
Okay. Anything else for area? Okay. We have a building inspector to appoint. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I'd move that Reed Wynot be appointed as the building inspector for the town of Mahone Bay effective June 24th, 2021, and until such time as the appointment is revoked.
Thank you. Do we have a
I'll
second?
second that.
Councillor Carver. Councillor Nell, do you have a comment?
Just a quick question. There's a couple of Reed Wynots around. This isn't the same Reed Wynot that's a counselor for MODL, is it? Do you know?
It's not.
It's not, okay.
How many Richard Nows are there around?
Yeah.
Hopefully
Okay.
only one, but
One's enough. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Mr. Wynot is appointed. Let's now go to the proposed amendment to the REMO bylaw. It's in your package. Just a couple of, I think, minor changes to the intermunicipal agreement. They are highlighted. Councillor Carver.
I hope I have the right one. I move that council provide first reading of the draft REMO bylaw and that a public hearing be set for July 29th, 2021.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson seconds. You've heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the next one. Town office reopening plans. Little drum roll. CAO, over to you.
Yes, happy to speak to this one. So this report is presented for information. There's no recommendation other than to accept for information. But we did want to provide a timeline, the latest from both the work of our contractors on the building and also obviously responding to COVID protocols to be able to safely reopen. And there is I guess, a recommendation in there with regards to council wanting to consider the possibility to resume in-person sessions of either council or committees beginning after the August break. So that is something perhaps the council members would like to talk about, and also I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions? Councillor Carver.
Well, I'm really glad that the staff report commented on the value of the flexibility of meeting in person or virtually, because I think we've come to realize how convenient that is for brief meetings or inclement weather. I think that was a great point too. One of the things that I am concerned about when we do get back in person in council chambers and we are live streaming is the sound quality. I noticed, for example, in a meeting yesterday when Chester, for example, was in their council chambers. So they were live streaming from the council chambers. And I find that the sound quality is not great. So I've got fingers crossed that we're going to be great.
Yeah, I guess I'd share the same sentiment. We've done everything we can, although until we're actually trying it out there, we'll be able to see how that works out. And there's probably some adjustments that can be made. I'm hopeful it will work out better. One thing that we can say about having a slightly smaller council chambers, I know it's not ideal for some circumstances, it is generally better for audio quality for these type of things. Chester has a bit of a cavernous space and they're all at one end of it.
Have we upgraded or updated our audio equipment from what we had been using before?
Yeah, the audio equipment will be different from what we've used before.
Okay.
There's a opportunity to kind of combine the room audio with individual video. So if we're sitting in a distance way and councillors want to have their laptops open, we'll use central audio, but can actually achieve this familiar view rather than having a room view that everyone is distant from each other. If we're all sitting in a normal circumstance, absent social distancing, there is also room camera shots that are available and we don't have to have the laptop. So there's a couple of different configuration options.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? This is a report for information. Councillor Burdick.
I'll move that council accept this report for information.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver moved and seconded that this report is accepted by council for information purposes only. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, let's go to my trusty agenda here. Greenhouse gas reduction plan implementation. I don't see Catherine in the room, so CAO, that must be yours.
Yes, I'm sure she would have been willing to come, but we often take a lot of time in discussion of other items, so I didn't obligate her to come tonight. She's been working hard to implement the plan that was approved by council a couple of months ago. And obviously a number of items there can advance further with council's approval of the budget May 27th. So this report updates on progress on our initiatives under that GHG plan and also presents a few recommendations that are aligned with the actions in that approved plan. So there are essentially 4 recommendations that are presented that could be moved as one or multiple motions, and I'm happy to take questions about those or otherwise.
Councillor Feeney.
Just a quick question about some of the projects before we get to the individual recommendations. The EV chargers, were we successful in receiving the supporting grant, the supporting federal and provincial government support for that initiative, Dylan?
Yes, so I know this has been a long time project. So it's a good question just for anybody viewing and even new members of council. We went in with the other municipal electric utilities in Atlantic Canada, led by St. John, I think 11 in total. And we're successful in obtaining that funding, NRCan funding, 50% of the cost for, it was about 120 level 2 charging stations throughout the municipal electric service territories in Atlantic Canada. And Berwick, Antigonish, and Mahone Bay represented the Nova Scotia component of that, and Area led that up. We were successful in obtaining the funding. It took a while to come through with the agreements being signed with St. John Energy. And now we actually have the equipment on site. It has been delivered to town, so we've been getting much closer to installation.
Okay.
CAO, where are we at with the co-funding on the electric vehicle?
So the electric vehicle that was approved in the budget, it doesn't have an external funding stream associated with it. Catherine was doing some research and wanted to point out that we're now at $7,500 in rebates between provincial and federal rebates. So we would be able to receive $7,500 in rebates on the purchase of a vehicle. The opportunity in terms of levering the vehicle purchase would be to essentially make a pitch to FCM that this vehicle would be used as part of a program for car sharing in order to bring residents into the essentially early adoption of electric vehicles for their own use, or potentially as the beginning of an alternative program for car sharing to offset personal vehicle use. But we haven't. This recommendation here was to essentially start with a fleet vehicle that could be used for demonstration purposes, but could also be used to eliminate emissions from the corporate side. So, when staff and council travel, those emissions contribute to our town profile. And while we don't have a lot of electric vehicle options to replace our larger fleet vehicles, and we don't have very many small fleet vehicles, what we do have is a lot of reliance on personal automobiles that are fossil fuel powered, and that does count towards our emissions profile. So that's the primary purpose for the proposed EV purchase that's in the budget. Yeah.
Will this EV replace any of the vehicles that we currently are using? And I'm thinking of the small truck kind of thing.
I think it will replace some of the personal use of, or the corporate use of personal vehicles, and some of the corporate use of corporate vehicles for, say, attending a meeting within the community or nearby community. If a member of council or staff has the option to sign out the vehicle to use it to attend a meeting, say, that's taking place in Lunenburg or Bridgewater, that offsets the use of their personal vehicle for that purpose. And we wouldn't be paying the mileage either. So there's an offset of both the emissions and also the cost.
Would that be a requirement of our reimbursement policy that the EV would be taken, that opportunity would be taken first? If
That
the
might be
car was
something council
available-
would want to consider in terms of trying to ensure the maximum reduction in emissions. But we haven't made that decision at this point.
Okay. Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Carver.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just wondering about this EV car or whatever it will be. Has there ever been an actual analysis done of the cost-benefit relationship, buying the thing versus what it's going to give us back, either in marketing dollars or in cost saving?
Prior to any purchase, that type of analysis will be presented to council with a recommendation. So this is just here to say it's in the budget and we will have subsequent reporting on it.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
A totally practical question. Where is the EV going to be stationed? Where will it be parked and plugged?
So we have the charger location that's going in at the town office. So one option would be that it remains at that public charger location. Another option would be to, if and when we purchase the vehicle, to install a specific charger elsewhere on the premises. We do still have the bay as well. So, if there was a desire to store it indoors there, depending on our future decisions around the location of other vehicles in bays elsewhere, that might be an option as well in the wintertime. So, but we do already have the intention to have the one charging location on the town hall premises at the least.
Other comments, Deputy Mayor?
Just out of curiosity, rather than buy a vehicle for, I guess, as described here, wouldn't it have been, I guess, better to be replacing one of the works vehicles that is most probably most used by the public works guys? I would assume that would get much more utilization than the one that's being proposed, and probably low emissions much more. Or
Yeah,
I could
we're
be wrong.
Well, I know it's a good point. We're still working on a fleet plan. So the town intentionally purchased a used vehicle. We don't have many light duty vehicles. So we have essentially one in that, category that would be an easy replacement with an electric vehicle at this point. Now, still electric trucks are relatively new comparatively, but we're getting into that point where they're more common. And that vehicle that we purchased was a used vehicle. So the intention is that when it is up for replacement, we'll be able to do a good analysis about the opportunity to take on another electric vehicle there. And this is a great opportunity for discussion around the electrification of the fleet broadly. I know the mayor had come upon an interesting article the other day, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind my pointing out, about electric fire vehicles coming into use elsewhere in the country. The first model is coming to use out west, I understand, and our fire chief was quite fascinated by that. He actually followed up with the company and got some literature from them. So while it's not likely for this fire vehicle purchase, projecting forward to the next one, it certainly is a possibility to become an intention for our fleet. And on a much lower key level, we just got a quote from Castle on a effective self-propelled electric mower as a possible, small step. The climate analysis out in the West Coast demonstrates that because of the low standards for emissions on mowers and leaf blowers, the emissions from standard leaf blowers and mowers actually exceed those from personal automobiles. So one of the easiest things that we can do to cut down corporate emissions would be to just use an electric powered lawnmower. And so that's an option we're looking at a small scale.
Okay. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I think we've received from staff a number of recommendations. And if you'd like, I'm happy to move a few of those forward.
Well, just before you do that, I did want to make one observation, and that is around directing staff to amend Action 14 of the Greenhouse Gas Action Plan in consideration of the submission from Talking Trees. I believe that submission has been referred to 4 different committees of council and the Policy and Strategy Committee, and I don't think we've heard back from any of them as to the relevance of that particular document impacting policy decisions of council. So it may be inappropriate to have that in there as a reference. CAO?
Yes, I just wanted to speak to that because I know council did refer it to a lot of places. One of those places was to Catherine, our climate and energy program manager, to consider relevance to this particular document. And so what she's doing there, not to prejudge council's discussions, is just taking the items that we already have in council's strategic plan that wasn't adopted at the time when the greenhouse gas reduction plan was adopted, which can sort of safely be said to speak to the priorities included in that document, but are already in council's approved strategic plan, and suggesting that just those be added in. And then if at such a time as council's considered the Talking Trees correspondence more broadly, having to do with bylaws and other suggestions that have been raised, that could also be added into the GHG reduction plan at such a time. But she stopped short of that for the moment. So this is in response to council's directive.
We should take the reference to Talking Trees out of this piece. When we get responses, when the determination is made to embrace and what parts of Talking Trees we're going to embrace, we can ensure that it's in the GHG plan. I think it's a bit presumptuous in anticipation of what council might say to put that in here now. And in fact, it may create something that we're on the garden path toward, and it becomes almost impossible to change. We're still waiting for input on that document. CAO?
Certainly council's prerogative. I just want to be clear that we're discharging the direction of council to make a recommendation in this regard.
Yep. Councillor Feeney?
So I think, Mayor, to your point, I think the salient point here is the reference to the natural asset data collection and the development of an urban forest master plan, which I think are both components of the strategic plan, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
So I think all we're saying here is to proceed with those 2 authorized and sanctioned items. And I think Catherine, to her credit, is just trying to provide a little background color on the fact that was also discussed by Talking Trees. you know, so I take, so I think if we, you know, I think if so, I'd make a motion that staff amend action 14 of the approved GHG reduction action plan to include reference to the natural asset data collection and the development of the urban forest master plan as per council's 21 to 25 strategic plan.
Agree.
Is that, I think that's about right?
Yeah. What if there's other items in that recommended?
But do you want to handle them one at a time, Mayor, or would you rather?
I think we can just do it all as one.
Fair enough. Well, okay, everyone sees the rest of the recommendations. Also, that council directs staff to present an amended draft asset management policy to include climate mitigation considerations. Council also directs staff to implement action 15 of the GHG reduction plan to establish a climate advisory committee by presenting a draft schedule of the committee's policy for council's consideration, and as well to direct staff to implement action 16 of the plan to include a climate analysis on all staff reports, and that will have a negative or positive impact on climate.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick. Okay, you've heard the motion. On the question, Councillor Carver?
Well, I do take issue with removing that clause about in consideration of the submission from Talking Trees that was directed to staff, because that was the recommendation from council that submission be sent to the greenhouse gas action plan for consideration. So I can't support that. And if the items are going to be presented as a block, I'll have to vote against it. And I have a question about the third bullet. By the draft schedule, what I don't understand the term draft schedule.
CAO?
Yeah, just to clarify, so in order to establish a committee of council, council would need to approve a schedule to the committee's policy. The terms of reference is what the schedules to the committee's policy are. So essentially that motion directs staff to propose a terms of reference for the Climate Action Advisory Committee for council's consideration.
So is schedule just another way of saying terms of reference?
Yeah, that's what the schedules to that policy are.
Okay.
It's the
Oh,
terms
thank
of
you.
reference.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry.
you. So my preference would be then for these items to be presented separately rather than as a block.
Councillor Feeney?
So, Mayor, with regard to the Talking Trees bullet, I mean, I think we had a large submission from Talking Trees. It included lots of recommendations, some of which are going to be supported and others which will be debated and discussed again on Monday evening. I think all we're talking about now is one of their suggestions, which was to start collecting natural asset data. And I think that's something we've all talked about, we're all in agreement with. Now, you know, I'm not sure who's going to get credit for that. I'm happy to give it to Talking Trees, but I think whether that credit is going to be in the required in the motion or not, the point is that Talking Trees thought it was a good idea and advocated for natural asset data collection. And that's exactly what we're asking staff to start doing. So it's win-win, I think, Councillor Carver. And I think the other item was the idea of developing a urban master forest plan. Now, that plan is just going to be developed. In this motion just talks about the development of the plan, and I wouldn't want to presuppose what the plan will inevitably look like, but that's another debate for down the road. Tonight, we're just talking about directing staff to start developing the plan, which I think will be widely viewed as progress. So I think if I think if you're part of the Talking Trees group, you'd say this is progress, and we'll continue on with the discussion next Monday.
Deputy Mayor.
So based on that, I would suggest a friendly amendment to the motion to bring it back to what it reads on this particular report. I think that will cure the problem. Because you said you're okay with it being with Talking Trees being given the credit, so let's just give it to them.
Well, so the issue, Deputy Mayor, I take your point, is that the sentence is currently, the motion as it was presented was talking about consideration of the submission. And I don't think we're there yet, because we're only going to be discussing the submission at length at a later date, next Monday to start. So within their lengthy 11-page detailed document, there's all kinds of items within that submission. This is just a very specific component of the submission. And so at a later date, other elements of the Talking Tree submission may be approved. But really tonight, I think we can seek alignment on is really the fact that we're going to start collecting natural data, and we're going to develop an urban forest master plan. So I guess that's the only point I have, Francis. It's the difference between the entire 12-page submission versus just those two bullets.
Yeah.
That's where I was coming from.
Yeah, and I don't disagree. What I'm saying is that the way the motion reads to me is that we recommended that this be given to Catherine to take a look, and Catherine has come back and said, I've taken a look, and I'm suggesting that these two pieces, which agree with the strategic plan, need to be included. And so it was based on it was based on looking at that report that she's come back with this suggestion. So, and I think that's what Councillor Kaba is talking about. Let's just give them credit where it's due. They're the ones who've moved this forward, and it's, for me, the motion as it reads now does not in any way say that as council we are taking everything that Talking Trees have told us. It's just that one particular piece that they've highlighted, we are considering that, and I'm comfortable with that. I don't know why we're uncomfortable with it.
We're building a narrative, Deputy Mayor. Step by step, day by day, we're building a narrative. And after a while, you lose sight of what council did or did not decide on. CAO?
Yeah, I don't know if there's room for coordination on the wording, but I just wanted to present a very small amendment to the original wording that might work better for people, to say in consideration of council's direction to staff on the submission from Talking Trees, which means that this motion is only in consideration of council's direction to staff on the submission from Talking Trees, and it is not in consideration of the submission from Talking Trees. I know that's a bit semantic, but if that might help to address the concern being raised.
But what was council's direction to staff? We sent direction to 4 different groups.
Well, that's to clarify that this would only be that one of those pieces, right? Not all 4. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Burdick and then Councillor Carver.
I think that the CAO suggestion is very reasonable, and semantics seem to matter in this situation. So I'm all for that. It doesn't say that we're taking the whole thing right now and saying this is a Talking Trees stamped document. So I like that. I like that change.
Okay, Councillor Carver.
Thank you. Semantics do matter, and I appreciate that change.
Okay.
And I still think that I would prefer to do these one at a time rather than as a block, but that's just me.
Okay, Councillor Feeney, do you want to withdraw your original motion?
Yes.
Who was your seconder?
Lots of support. Lots of support for this, Mayor.
You will withdraw, Councillor Burdick? Okay. Now back to you, Councillor Feeney.
Fine, why don't we start with the first one?
Okay,
I'd move that council direct staff to present an amended draft asset management policy to include climate mitigation considerations.
okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Burdick? All in favor? Motion's carried. Next one.
CAO, did you have some thoughts about amending the next one? I saw you had something up in chat. Let me just bring this up here.
Yeah, my suggestion was that you could insert that text following the comma after greenhouse gas reduction action
In
plan.
consideration of council's direction to staff on the submission, Mayor, versus in consideration of.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can live with that. So I think that statement as amended to be amended with in consideration of council's direction to staff on the submission from Talking Trees. Directing staff, and the salient point of the motion, which is directing staff to include reference to natural asset data collection, to have an inventory of, that's what we're looking for, an inventory, and the development of a long-term urban forest master plan, which is, I think, the other key element that people are coming together on, as per council's 21 to 25 strategic plan.
Okay, do we have a seconder? I can't see everybody. Councillor Carver seconds. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor?
And as well, a motion to direct staff to implement action 15 of the GHG reduction action plan, which is to establish a climate advisory committee by presenting a draft schedule of the committee's policy to council's consideration.
Okay, do we have a seconder on that one? Councillor Now, on the question. You've heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the last one.
And finally, to direct staff to implement action 16 of the GHG reduction action plan to hereafter include a climate analysis on all staff reports that may have a positive or negative impact on the climate.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson seconds. Okay. Councillor Carver, you have a question?
I do. Thank you. I like the idea of including that kind of, what's the word, the prism, a climate analysis. And do we have other issues in which that kind of analysis is relevant when we're receiving staff reports? I'm thinking, for example, accessibility could be a similar kind of issue that.
CAO?
Yeah, I believe there probably are others like that. And I think it's important to think about that this is something that is kind of a living structure. So as we go forward with the accessibility operational plan, and that doesn't just mean looking at our sidewalks and things and trying to correct the actual errors, but building accessibility into our practices, then I certainly could imagine that type of a recommendation coming forward. And there's other areas as well, such as we've talked about anti-racism. You know, depending on direction from council, there may be other opportunities for.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion. All in favor? That motion is carried. Thank you. That is the end of staff reports. We now go to item 7, residents' application to join the Heritage Advisory Committee. Are we going to put any information on the screen, clerk, for that one?
No, Your Worship, we have an application from a member of the community for the open position on the Heritage Advisory Committee. council has all received that application. So
Yeah, as a separate mailing item,
that's correct.
okay? Councillor Feeney,
Mayor, I'd move that council appoint Annette St. Ange to be a member of the Heritage Advisory Committee.
thank you. Seconded by the deputy mayor. You've heard the motion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Does that give the HAC a full complement now, or are we still
Yep.
shy a member or two?
That's the full complement. I'm just wondering, Councillor Feeney, are there two representatives from the Founder Society on there now, or just the one at the present?
I believe it's just Bill, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so too. So there is in fact another opportunity for the Founder Society to
appoint.
appoint someone. But
Yeah.
that's, as far as community appointments, we are complete now.
Okay, thank you. We've got two committee reports. One is asset management. The other one is the cemetery committee. Does anyone have any question about the asset management committee minutes? Okay. Let's go to the cemetery committee. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, we had a cemetery committee meeting. I guess it was Monday now. This has been a long week. Monday, a couple things that came out of the meeting. One was a recommendation from the cemetery committee to council to direct staff to proceed with the application for grants, one of which is to support the new fence. So I think the CAO is looking for some direction at this meeting to be able to follow through with the grant application process, which I think is soon. So I'd make that motion to direct staff to apply to the grant. I think Dylan has the language on which grant application that is.
Okay, thank you.
I think beautification's in the word somewhere. This is
Like
the
a beautiful
this is
fence around your graveyard.
yeah, this is the new fence to replace the chain link fence that runs up Clearland Road, to replace it based on the historical looking traditional fence, and as well fix the fence along Main
And
Street.
it'll be a composite material, will be impervious to rot and whatnot.
Well, that's the plan.
Hopefully. Okay,
It'll look just like it did in 1892, which is
There
the
you
picture
go.
we
There you
have,
go.
but it'll last a lot longer. Is the
That's right.
intention.
it's not meant to keep the people out, it's to keep the ghosts in, I think. Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Now. Moved and seconded. All in favor? The motion is carried.
Mayor,
Thank
just one other item on
Yeah.
the cemetery, with regard to the cemetery committee. The committee did receive a report from the CAO and regarding a number of trees which are now been deemed to be dead, and they need to be removed. And given that, you know, tree removal is a sensitive topic lately, I just wanted to bring that to council's attention, that the plan to remove the dead trees will be followed up with tree replacement where appropriate,
Good.
with I think the appropriate types of trees, and that the concern for some of the historical headstones was starting to was really paramount in the decision to move that item along. So I don't know off the top of my head exactly which trees they are, but as I understand it, and Dylan can dial in, these trees have been reviewed by an arborist, and they've been determined to be dead. So they need to come down soon, I think.
Clerk, and then Councillor Carver.
Yes, there are actually 6 trees that will be removed. They are dead and they are actually quite dangerous. They were brought to our attention. We inspected them with our tree specialist, and we actually had a couple people from Talking Trees actually that have experience with trees that came out to look at trees and stuff with us as well, because it is a sensitive location. It's going to be a very dangerous location. So we wanted to have a really good sense of the work that would be required. So of the 6 dead trees, there's one large dead, I think it's a maple. I keep getting myself tangled up. I took a lot of notes that day. I think it's a maple that is directly behind the Visitor Information Center. That is definitely dead. It needs to come down quite soon, and a tree will be replanted there. There is a large dead elm in the center of the cemetery that needs to come down, or else it's going to fall down very soon. A tree cannot be replanted in the exact same spot, but there is a location nearby that another tree will be replanted. We have not yet determined which type of tree, but will be a native species. There are also the remaining trees that will be removed are dead red pines along the fence between the Vic parking lot and the end of Clearland Road, and those will not be replanted because them being thinned out will just remove the need for competition with the other trees in the stand.
Councillor Carver.
Thank you. The clerk answered one of my questions, which was which cemetery were the dead trees in. So I gather they're in Bayview, but this seems to be a wonderful opportunity for the town to do some pushing information and explanation and education all at the same time in some really good Facebook posts. I'm sure you're on it. Already, yeah. It just seems to be the perfect moment to do that. Thanks.
Clerk, did you want to say anything about that?
Just to say, it does actually come at a good time when we've been having discussions about, in fact, with our the people with Talking Trees, as we talk about our centennial trees and the fact that there's ongoing maintenance for those trees. There's certainly a need to have a conversation in the public sphere about the important maintenance and what's required to live with a tree. So this is definitely bringing that to the forefront. And as Councillor Carver noted, we have already thought of that and we're working on that already.
Have we replaced the #1 oak tree by Jubilee Pond that didn't make it?
Your worship, we actually just yesterday took well, I didn't take delivery. We picked up, there are 5 trees that need to be replaced. The #1 tree, one of the centennial trees that were planted all together. They're the linden by the duck pond. And there are 3 trees that failed to thrive across from the Irving. So we just got those yesterday and we're going to get those in the ground soon so that they're in before it gets any hotter.
Good, thank you. And that completes our agenda. Jeez, and Mickey says it's only 8:45. That's good. Anybody have any new business? No. Okay. Well, with that, what's next on the agenda? Next Monday night, I think, is the Strategy and Policy Committee? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor now moves. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you and good night. Go outside and
Are there any
enjoy
questions?
the weather. I don't
Yes,
even,
ma'am.
is there anybody left?
We do still have 7 people watching and there are no questions.
Please ask us a question.